Working. So there you go.
Yay,
We're
we're
live. So this is done. Now let me see. Let me check that this works. So hello everyone. I think yes, we are live. All right, I can confirm that. So let me see now. Where are we? Here we are. Because I have to be careful because I can't miss Kimberly coming in. So hi everyone and welcome. We are here with the roundtable to tonight or today, where depending where you are, and whenever you are watching this. So today our topic is death, around death. Right? It's a big topic, a topic that is, I think, only just to mention it, put a lot of fear in many people, in many of us, because, well, there is a lot around that. So, but what I want to do today is that I don't want to go into spiritual stuff around death. I don't care about that, because we want to do something that is much more close to our understanding, our human understanding of that, our experience with that death. Because, well, this is look, only today I just went for 2 seconds on Facebook, and the 2 posts that I've seen were 2 of my friends that have lost their mother or the mother of their wife. So there's a lot of being living in this last with COVID, with the pandemic, and even still now, right? Many are using this time to live. So there is a lot of grievance, a lot of loss in this moment, and we all feel that. And we are also tired. Some of them can be tired, right, with that. So, well, we want to dig into that. It's what we have. So I am joined by my very, very, very special friends that are going to assist and co-host and everything with me tonight. So we have Isabelle.
Hello, everyone. So nice to be here. Max, I think this topic is wonderful, and it is my honor to share my insight and my personal experience of loss, because death is also loss, and it's also an ending. And Spirit has been working with me on this also. Ending chapters, new beginnings, death of myself in a way. And that is really interesting. So I am thrilled to be here.
And we have Nikki.
Hi, everybody. Hey, Max. I love the topic. This is the one thing that I think it's a big one, because, we are moving from fear into love. We're moving into oneness, and it's the big one, like I remember when I was, before I knew anything about spiritual, esoteric teachings and spiritual knowledge and all that, my biggest fear was losing my mother. And I just thought I couldn't survive that loss. It's amazing that, the journey we take along these experiences, the people who leave us, whether physically or they leave us in our environment. It's always been a big one for me, so I'm excited to hear what other people have to say about it. I think it's when we can move into more fluidity with accepting what is, this, especially around this, in this arena, it's a big step towards more freedom. So love it.
Yes, thank you. And we have Kimberly that has also joined us.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, it's my honor to be here once again to share this co-creation and yeah, so death is a big topic. It's also an existential one, and yeah, I guess it's undermines a lot of root fears that we all share, right? About our life and how we live in our reality and how we risk, moving into, it's even inspired guidance sometimes because this whole thing about fear, it's very, it can be very deep rooted within us, but of course it's all related to the concept of duality, the paradigm of duality in which we, attach our lives to and experience physical reality in. So it's, and of course we'll discuss today that death, is not the end, right? But yeah, for many people who go through loss and grief, I mean, of course, I've experienced it as well. We all have, right? It's a human experience, and yeah, I'm just glad to be here and share this co-creation here today.
Thank you. So what I've thought that I've written down some questions that I'll see. Well, I mean, we'll just go as it flows, but I'll come up with some of these questions. So some are personal. So you will handle them as you feel. Right? There are no obligations of answer or anything, but I just wanted to disclaim that. So I will just start with a little introduction with this topic. Why did I choose this? Well, very simple. When we did the last roundtable, when we before we went live, when I joined in with Nikki, it was hosted by Nikki, so Nikki was, and I joined in, and I had a video or something playing, and the very word that happened in the very moment I joined was death. And so I said, all right, that's what we're gonna to do next time. So I took that as a sign. I choose to go and run with that. Also because there are many reasons why, but right, but I feel that we have to go with our hearts. It's the way right now. So that this is one of those ways, right, to just bring everyone and go in that direction. So, what is death for me? I think that is the first question for all of us: is what is death for you? And so for me, I see death in different, right? Obviously, different levels. I met the being death. There is death. Death exists as a being. Obviously, we are creator beings, and we believe in death. So death exists as a being. Well, it's a wonderful light. It's a wonderful being that has nothing to do with death, with our belief in death, right? That is one thing. But I have also experienced death in personally and of what I see other people. My personal experience of death is that I died, but I'm still here. So that is one thing, right? Personally, I know that in certain experiences that I had, well, I left. So that means that I just choose to focus myself somewhere else in that reality. But not everywhere, so I'm still here. And then there is the death that I experience as I witness it. I witness the fact that other beings are living. whether I see it with my eyes or whether I have the awareness because I am told. So there are beings that decide not to stay here, so they leave. And so as they leave, well, there has to be something, and that something is death. So that's that there is that aspect. But here we are still not entering into the feeling and into what that awakens, how we react to it, how we are with it, right? That is much more important. And so the next step is, do I fear death? Because death, I heard people saying it's not the first fear that we have. We have much more fear of speaking in public. That's the biggest fear for everyone. No, that's, for me, that's just crap. We are all fearful of that, and you are just to see how people behave with aging, trying to stop aging, try to stop anything, any sign of advancing in time, meaning that if I advance in time, I go closer to my death. So I try to stop that. Maybe that will cheat death, right? So the fear is there. We are all fearful of that because whatever we may be able to say, even the thing, oh, it's just living, it just focusing somewhere else, we don't fucking know for sure, right? This reality is about knowing nothing for sure. Nothing is proven in this reality, and we live with that. That is the truth that we have, except that we have a knowing that we express, so we go with that. And that is what we express, right? What we can do. And so that point of uncertainty that has to remain. We have to say, we are not 100% sure of anything. Well, right? So what is after death? What is that? We don't know. So we're scared of that because it's the unknown. And there is our own death, and then there is the death of our beloved one, which maybe is even more scary than our own, because we are scared of being left behind and be alone. In our body, in our DNA, in our inside, we know what we fear that also because we are experiencing that in many ways, right? In other lives. So we have the connection, so we feel that. So we are expressing that right here, right now. So yeah, death represents fear of the unknown, of the loss. And what am I going to do when my partner, my wife, my husband, my children, or parents, what am I going to do if or when they die, leave me, right? And that's something that, well, only when you experience it you can say, right? But that's also the unknown, because we try to figure it out, but we are not able to do that, because when it happens, we are all simply and completely lost. We can try to lie to ourselves and say that we are going to handle it very well, that we're going to be first class in death and be the strongest one in the family, holding hands and guiding everyone, and then when it happens, we're just the one that is just on the floor wiping and not able to put together one and one, right? We don't know. So there is that, and I think that now I'm going to allow you to who wants to say anything.
I'll go, Max. All right. Loss, grieving. Ironically, a friend of mine was crying over her grandmother, and her grandmother loved prints, like animal prints. And I said, oh, she's here right now. And she's telling me that you can go to any store, no matter what it is, and find something with an animal print on it. So like if you're in a grocery store, she'll find something with an animal print on it, or, you know, any kind of store. But she was in pain because she missed her grandmother so much, because she could talk to her grandmother and she didn't have that relationship. So it is that loss that we feel very intensely when somebody is no longer physically incarnated here, right? And there seems to be what's interesting. So when I first awoke, Spirit was preparing me for loss, that there was going to be a lot of change. And so loss is like a change, because it's taken me 4 years to really understand there is no loss, but we feel it very intensely. And you really have to go through the emotions of that loss, or that emotions of change. There is a grieving time. There is anger. There is feeling scared. There is feeling a fear of being alone. There is why. Why now? Why did that have to happen? And so one of the things that really kind of, like, I lost my father very young. I was 18 when my father passed. And I just, because of that experience, I remember thinking at myself, wow, life is really fleeting. You really don't know how long you have. And so because of that loss, I tried to embrace life, to enjoy life, right? But my mother grieved around my father differently. My sister suppressed it. I mean, we all grieve so differently. We all handle loss so differently. But now I understand loss is just change. It's just a change. It's just a different form, or a different frequency, or a different experience. And so as we age, loss of youth, it's just a different experience. And so, you know, if they hadn't beaten it into my head every day, Max, but there is no loss, that it's just an experience, and that we came here as humans to experience loss. Like, we really signed up for it. And when Roxanne channeled the Martians, who are the Yetis and Bigfoot, and they said, oh, we don't die, it's not part of our soul collective to experience that, I went, holy shit. Oh my God. Spirit was so right, that we came here as humans on Earth, incarnated to experience loss. It's part of our soul collective. So, you know, do I like loss? Do I go, yay? No.
Well,
You know, but I do understand it's an experience, and it's just a change, and there really is no loss. So, you know, I just go through the muck. I just go through the muck, and I go through the feelings, and I kind of just embrace it. And I, you know, again, you guys are getting me as a 4-year degree graduate. I'm not a freshman in college anymore. So I've had a lot of coursework on this. And so that is how I look at loss personally right now. You know, before I was devastated, before I would break out in hives and like all sorts of turmoil and chaos and depression, and you know, it was thick and really, really heavy. But now I can tell you, if you work on this, that you know there is no loss and it's just a change. I don't know, it does soften it. It does. And now, you know, the ones that are departed, I can talk to them. So I'm not feeling it like a door has really been shut on me.
That's really helping, right? Because
You know,
it takes away the loss, right? The feeling of loss, or of it's the ending, the feeling that is the end, right? Suddenly you say it's not the end.
no, it's just a change of energy. It's just a change of experience. It's just an experience for my soul growth and expansion. And again, this has been beaten in my head, like all the time. So somebody recently tried to commit suicide, and the light worker was in a really bad way. And I said, hey, let me pop you under. Because the light worker called me after they tried to kill themselves. And I said, it's okay. It's okay. And the light worker was going to drive themselves into a tree and was jerking the wheel really forcibly. And the car stayed on the road. And when the light worker went under in the session, Spirit came and said, this light worker cannot go. We know this light worker wants to jump ship because the intensity is so strong. But this light worker cannot go because this light worker has contracts with other souls. And this light worker must stay, and it's okay. It's okay that this light worker was at such a point that this light worker wanted to end the physical incarnation here. But the reason why I share this story is because no one dies by accident. There are soul contracts and there are agreements. So even if you want to end your life, or you know someone who did end their life and they succeeded, that was allowed, that was accepted, that was agreed upon for the family. There's a lot going on, and I know they have told me this over and over and over again. So when I recently had this experience and I put my light worker under, and my light worker told me from the human perspective, and then when Spirit came and told me in that perspective, you know, I said, we just experienced a miracle. And miracles to me is when Spirit intervenes and it's unexplainable. That's what a miracle is for me personally. You might have a different definition. But all death is wanted. And we may not be ready when our dear ones depart, but you have no control anyways. But their inner being has allowed it, and it's all for us. And so there really is no accidental death. And they've been telling me this. They said, Isabelle, I said, so if I step on this ant, I just killed this ant. That was allowed. That ant wanted to die. That ant wanted to go back to non-physical. Yep. Even from the chicken I eat or to the burger, no death, not even the ant that I step on. It is all agreed upon. Am I aware of it as Isabelle at this level of consciousness? No. But because now, 4 years later, and it's so ingrained in me, I feel those emotions because I know I came here for those emotions, and it's okay for me to be sad, and it's okay for me to be mad, and it's okay for me to grieve. But it does give me a big comfort to know that indeed it was planned, it was divine, it was in God's hands, it was in Source hands.
That's beautifully said, Isabelle. And that's, that's a very important point. And Spirit tells me this all the time as well, that, we do have soul contracts and collective soul contracts. So these are pre-birth intentions. And part of these soul contracts or pre-birth intentions includes when we want to leave this physical reality. So we pre-plan this pre-birth. And yes, we might not be aware of this on a conscious human level, just like you said, Isabelle, but it does bring comfort knowing, especially especially events that's happening around the world now, when you do see so much, death, I guess, around the world, and when you see tragedy, for instance, and it does bring some comfort knowing that it was their time. We hear this all the time. It was their time, but that's actually true. And we might not understand it, and we also might not understand why they went, the time they went, and also the conditions around it, right? Because especially for people who transition, and that's what I like to call it, I like to call it a transition, because it's not the end. It is a physical, we might think it's a physical ending, but in reality, we're just going to another physical reality, right? So even in the physical sense, it continues, just not in this particular paradigm, right? And the conditions around their transition, their passing, I'm like, why would they choose something for themselves, especially when it's very, tragic, but we just don't understand it from a human perception, and it involves all those around us and all those involved, like the family and all those involved in the situation, even if it was like a criminal act, for instance. All those people involved in it. So whether it is the victim, the perpetrator, just for an example, and the families, it's all tied into their contracts, right? So usually the people that are left behind, right, they go through obviously grief and anger and all the emotions. And yes, we do have to process it, no matter how much we know about, the non-physical and these processes, we still have to process it, just like any fear. Loss is part of that, and yes, with loss, sometimes it's intense, like we can experience the intense emotions, like anger, sadness, and then it might seem okay, and it's not linear. It can come back anytime, so that's okay. It's a process, and there's no specific time period on when people should grieve, right? But it's just knowing that it's for their evolution. So they came in physical reality for this experience, because yes, like you said, Isabelle, not all realities and all experiences in creation get to experience loss, get to experience this intensity fear. And that's how Source expands itself. We are Source, and we're here in this physical reality to have this experience. And one of these experiences is death and loss. And although it's very difficult, and yes, it can turn our lives upside down, it's hard, especially when you're in the middle of it, to be like, oh yeah, it's for me. Yeah, I know, right? And it's just, it takes one step at a time, and to bypass. I mean, I won't go into the actual details, just in respect to my family, but I recently went through a loss too, and I still had to go through those processes. And even though Spirit was telling me why it happens, and basically why it was in a way a good thing, I'm like, okay, I still had the loss. I still had to process it, even knowing what I knew, even though I had all the messages about why it happened. I still had to process it. So it doesn't matter how much you know about this stuff, you cannot bypass the grief and the loss you have to process it, sit with it like any other fear. But yeah, and it's just a return to the heart, guys. And yes, those people that do transition, they're always with you, just not in this particular form. And you know, you hear about, you know, like animal signs and messages from spirit. Yes, they come to you in ways that matches your belief systems, right? So just keep your senses open. If you're one of those people who've recently experienced a loss or are still processing a loss in your life, just open your heart, make your intention to connect with them because they're still there. Connect with your heart. Your heart is a portal to non-physical. And just, you know, it makes us human. It makes us resilient. And for us to have this experience of loss, it gives us also a greater appreciation of life, of human experience. If we did not experience loss, if we were immortal in terms of being physically immortal, we probably wouldn't appreciate life as what it is, right? Because if we can't physically die, we wouldn't, you think about it, we wouldn't have the experiences we would have. We wouldn't appreciate and be grateful and just live our lives in a way that is aligned to our purpose here, and we just would see our life differently. So understand it's for our evolution. For those going through it, what we can do, even though we might know these higher perspectives, is that we can still practice compassion. So yes, we're all connected in oneness. So if you know people have transitioned, you know, you can still send love, right? You can still connect your heart with those people that have been, you know, left behind, so to speak, those people going through grief and loss, because we're all connected. And when you see someone in grief, someone that's processing all these difficult emotions, understand that they are also part of us. We are one. So if you know, cultivate compassion and the whole concept of sending love and light, that's actually a real thing, guys. So you can do that. We can all practice compassion. And it's just taking one step at a time. So if you're in the middle of it, it's about just honoring your journey. And processing it means to feel the emotions. If you need to cry, cry. If you need to scream, scream. You need to process it, physically process it, right? You need to sit with it as long as you need, you know. And with my background as a counsellor, working with people that's, you know, going through grief and loss, it's not about intellectually understanding everything. Sometimes you could sit there in a session with someone for nearly a whole hour and not say anything. It's just holding that space for that person to process. So that's what you need to do with yourself. Sit with yourself, sit with those memories and process it. Because even though there's a lot of higher perspectives around death, we still attach meaning to death in our human mind, our human conception. So we still need to process that or that side of it. So yes, understanding the higher perspectives does give us comfort, but we still need to process it from a human perspective, because we still attached to that concept of duality and physical reality. So it is a combination, a blending, I say. But, you know, with each step, with each time you process the emotions, you know, you can reflect on gratitude. Think of, especially someone who's close to that's transition. What did they bring into your life? Think of those memories and the lessons that they gave you, life lessons they gave you, understanding. So reflect on how that person's life affected you and how you grew because of that life. So it's, yeah, and their presence is always with you. Just remember that. And you can always connect with them through the heart. I mean, I've had experiences with, I mean, my parents are still here, are still alive. But in terms of my in-laws, I've had a beautiful experience in my wedding dress rehearsal. So my husband's father had transitioned and weren't able to make it, obviously, to our wedding. But we went afterwards. We had a meal for the dress rehearsal, and as I was sitting there, my father-in-law, his favorite band came on. The Beatles came on playing, and I just welled up in love, you know, even though obviously I would have loved to be closer to him because he did live overseas, but it was just such a beautiful sign. And when I heard that music and it was from the Beatles, I knew it was a message to my husband to say, he is here with you. And I did pass that on to him. So that's just one example of how they're always with us. We just do not always perceive it, but yeah. Nikki, did you want to say something?
Yeah. I felt that moment with you when you just shared it with us. I love hearing people's stories. I've heard so many good things, and thank you for selecting this topic, Max. So I love what Isabelle said. She said, loss is just change. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't like change. Like if I go to my yoga class, I go to the same side, the same mat where I'm directly in front. I don't want change. And change is having the same is equivalent to feeling safe, right? So when we lose someone or something, it's about feeling unsafe. And we on this earth are privileged to have the experience of feeling emotions intensely. Like some beings and races don't have that emotional element, okay? And what better way for us to practice than having loss? Okay, so we do have the big loss, which is the loss of a loved one, right? But we have so much preparation all along, every time we lose a friendship, or we have so many experiences with loss, losing a job, whatever. It's all the practice run for the big losses. And when I started really, when I was in the big thick of my emotions and having dark night of the soul, I did have an experience with loss, a loss of a relationship. And it was super interesting because, first of all, one thing is I can speak for all of us, I think, when we think we just can't handle that particular emotion. It's too big. Right? There's for some reason, there's a threshold where we can't go past. So we can go to a certain degree, but then it's too much. And I learned from my experiences with allowing my emotions to be with me is that I didn't die. None of those emotions killed me. And what's really interesting is when you really step into it and allow it to be there and allow it to take shape, and you withdraw the judgment and you withdraw all the shoulds and the should nots, and you just be with what is, it changes and transforms. And it's so interesting because what started out as the loss of a particular person turned into my own personal journey of grief on my losses as a young girl, and all the times that I abandoned myself, which were many, because my worthiness was achieved from external sources. So I was constantly, abandoning myself to grasp someone else's love so that I could feel worthy. And so that was an interesting journey when I really allowed myself to grieve. And what ended up being the real root of my grief was abandonment of self. And what's beautiful about what you don't want to talk about, Max, which is spirituality, is that we do get this incredible connection with ourselves through these big life experiences like loss. And I love what Kimberly said about compassion. So, it's funny, before I knew about the, spiritual teachings and all of that, and I remember when, one of the things people say when somebody dies is, I'm sorry for your loss, right? Or condolences, whatever. And when I first started following different spiritual teachings and there were people in the community, I had to change what I said, because you don't say that now, right? Because there's no loss, so we can't say there's a loss, right? So then I was I still wanted to reach out, and it's an unknown territory what you're supposed to say. And like, how you doing with that transition of your loved one? No, and sending love and light is a lot of, what are the like pat ones that people say. But I picked up the phone and I talked to someone who had lost like their soulmate, right, of many, many, many years. And she was in complete denial. This is not a judgment, it's an observation. She was not feeling her grief yet, right? So she was like, I'm good. And yeah, we're connecting spiritually and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, oh boy, you wait, but that's okay. It's still nice to be there for other people. And my husband, he didn't die, but he almost died. So he was in intensive care, and there was a 48-hour period where it wasn't clear if he was going to make it or not. And so I allowed myself to go into the feeling of, this could be it. And it was funny because I was like terrified. I was in the hospital. I was downstairs in the lobby. My son was there. We were holding each other's hands. And my son said, yeah, mom, it could be that, Papa's going to leave this planet, this realm, this physical realm. And we both sat with that feeling. And it was an odd feeling because there was a level of acceptance, when you get out of the duality and the story of it's wrong, right? And so it requires so much something. I don't even know what it requires, but it requires pushing through your fear, and it's interesting because it's always what's revealed about yourself and your beliefs is so interesting when we run into these, when we have these big life experiences. And in the summer, I was on holiday in the States, and this very powerful spiritual teacher and just incredibly smart, brilliant businesswoman died. And it was unexpected. She was 41 years old. And I was like in this state of shock. So shock is one of the things that we, and shock is also about our conceptions of what death is. So death, from the time you're born, it's the thing you want to avoid, right? Don't run down the stairs, your mother says, So we are conditioned right away in the Western world, in any case, to not want to, we don't want to know about any of that stuff, and we want to avoid it at all costs. So it can creep up on you. Your limiting beliefs have a tendency to do that, don't they? You here you are in alignment, and something happens in your reality, and boom, I'm triggered, So I was triggered by this death. And so I thought it would pass after, I accepted, or I after time. And 3-4 days goes by, and I'm like, wait a minute, I have to do a little bit of work. So I started writing down, what are my beliefs around this? And it was super interesting. One, powerful spiritual teachers that are 40 are not supposed to die. That was one of my beliefs, right? That it's wrong. I had these ideas about wrong, and there were quite a few. But as soon as I processed those beliefs, it was like, I was able to move over to that place where I was in acceptance. And it was simply, wow, what Kimberly was saying, in a way, look at what this teacher brought to me and brought to the world, an appreciation of that, And I have this, I had this pet, her name was Ginger, and she was a golden retriever. And we're so attached, like furry animals. I tell you, they give this pure love that I don't think we as humans can give, right? And so, like, it's really easy to receive that kind of love. And I have this cat that you've probably seen on the screen before. But so for Ginger, who passed transition 2 years ago, it just took me a while. I lit a candle. I felt my feelings. I missed her so much because we like the tangibility of being human, right? We like being in somebody's arms. We like holding an animal, looking into their eyes. And that's what we miss, because we're human, and it's part of our experiential existence. And it's so cool that we get to dip into all those feelings. If I think we said this in the very, very beginning about emotions, it's like they all have a rating. So joy, ecstasy, all of those things have such 4-star, 5-star ratings. But grief, suffering, that's -2, So yeah, when I moved into more of a place of accepting that she wasn't in my presence. She was there all the time, spirit wise. And I'd be like, oh my God, she's here right now. I can feel her. And every time I would think about Ginger, calling her name, right? I'd put my hands on my heart center and close my eyes and see that beautiful face, And nonetheless, no matter what Kimberly said, when I think about future events, like I've got this little furry kitty cat that I love named Cookie. She's 14. Okay. So I was in bed the other night and she was cuddled up all next to me and she literally had her paws like this. I felt like, oh my God, we're in this embrace. And I thought, she's 14. Oh God, she could die. Right. And then I was like, get out of the future. That is not a place to play, It really does. But what a wonderful gift. Because we are not eternal, we have this notion that this time, carpe diem, this moment is completely precious. This conversation we're having, we can never repeat it again. How delicious is that, right? And that's the thing about the spiritual realm and practicing the teachings of moving from fear to love. It's like we practice detaching, really being in the moment, but not holding on to it. It's like a good ice cream cone. It's going to be gone. Every lick, the whole bit. It's so fantastic. When it's done, do we cry? No, we say thank you. Now, what if we could imagine having that approach with, these loved ones, right? Like, oh my God, it was so amazing. And I don't know if in other cultures, or I'm sure probably in some races, alien races or whatever, they have that ability to just be in the love part of it, right? But we are humans, and accepting our humanness is so friggin' freeing. It's like, yeah. Grief is part of my emotional, realm of emotions. And I'm here to feel them all. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Beautiful. Thank you, everyone. Beautiful. You know what? I was this last. Well, I'm very in turmoil right now with emotions. So I'm I'm feeling 10 times, 100th time more the emotion that generally I do. So, well, anyway, but I've been these last weeks and months, I've been watching my husband, and I had that voice in my head of what is going to happen when he dies. He's going to die. Prepare yourself. Oh my goodness. And now what will I do if that is going to happen? Kind of prepare myself. Then obviously that's been going on for some times, and then suddenly I said, well, but what is this thing? What am I doing here? It's not dying. It's there. It's here. He is here, right? Is that my fear? And I said, and I realized, yes, that is obviously my fear of losing him. That is there. But I also realized that is not all of that, because, right, it's too intense, it's too specific of having this thought coming so often and so strongly. So then I realized, well, there some memory of what is happening in other lifetimes. And if there is a lifetime where I was his wife, and when we had children, and when he died, and we had a relationship close to what we have now, so a very loving, and we are very close, and we are very well together. So we really are a team. In that life as well, however, he died, leaving me, a woman, alone with children and with no revenue, because that was still a time where a woman could not work and have a revenue. So I was completely left penniless. And briefly, I had to marry another man, in order to have to sustain myself and my children, right? So that awakens in me the fear of losing him, because I have the impression that if I lose him, I will lose my abundance, my revenue, my sustain, right? Or my worth, right? I have that in my fear that is also present. And so I realized that, and suddenly when I realized that, I just accept all of that. And then I've been able also to see it's not happening. He's not dying right now. So the fear is that is the thing about fearing death, is that you fear it, but you are not dying. It's not happening. It's a fear of something, like always, what you are fearing, it's not happening because you are occupied fearing it. Because if it was happening, well, you won't be fearing, you will be having the experience, right? That's not the same thing. So I have that. And so that also make me realize, right, that relationship with that, with death, because death, death is something that you see, that you witness, that you also create then, because it's your right as a creator being. But that means that you will not see your death, that you cannot create your death because you're not seeing it. You always see the death of someone else. It's always from your perspective, so the perspective of the living. The death cannot have perspective because it's not focusing in this reality, right? They are living that reality, so they are not focusing in there, so they are not creating. So that is also one thing that is important to understand, right? When we perceive that, when we talk that, when we are fearful of it, when we try to understand that, is to put it in that perspective. Do we experience our death? Is that a thing? Do you think about your death? Do you think you're going to experience it?
Well, I can hop in here since I do past life regressions, and a lot of lives will go to the last day of life in the session. And, they do transition, and they are tied to their consciousness, because what's really interesting, so the life that we were in, I will ask that entity of that consciousness, what was the purpose of that life? And then they'll say the purpose. And then when I get to their inner being or higher self, I'll say, what was the purpose of that life? And it'll be two different things. Sometimes they'll be the same thing, but I love the fact that it's two different things. And there is always expansion and greater understanding. And the life that is shown in the hypnosis session is coming from your inner being. And of course, I say past life, but in actuality, that life is happening right now, right? Because there is no time. And so sometimes in those lives, the person will know, I'm dying today. Today is my last day. Or I'm going to die today. Like they'll sense it. It's really interesting, and some do not. So I think it's just a wide variety of experiences, but they are very peaceful when they transition. I think I've been told by spirit that death is way easier than birth.
That's amazing. Right? It's interesting because we see this violent death, violence happening, and we feel and we think, oh, and that's one of the reasons why we are afraid, right? The dying of cancer, having to go through all of that, dying of this or that, and it's violent and that. Yes, because you witness it, but are you going to experience it? Are you going to experience what you see other experiencing, right? And I wanted to say another thing that Nikki said. It's very interesting, the spiritual bypass. I'm a spiritual guy. I cannot be afraid of that. I cannot be taken in the grievance of losing someone, or I have to be, right? The one that is, well, no, you're human. You're not bypassing that, right? But it's interesting. We try, right? We try all the time to bypass our own, right, humanity and the expression of that. The emotion are so interesting because yesterday I was talking with the gray, so the beings that are doing the hybrid program, that is a very interesting example of that, because they have forgotten their emotional body for a while, and now they come back into their emotion. And it's always right when we talk about emotion for these other beings, it's not human emotions, nothing to do with our emotions, something else, it's theirs. We don't know what that is, and I say we don't care because it's not human, so we cannot even imagine that, because we are not built to imagine what something else is. So, but I was talking with them, and it was interesting to have this thing saying, well, you let go of your emotions, and look, I'm here having all these emotions about everything, right, especially right now. But I have to say, I don't want to have it in any other way. I don't want to be not feeling, even when I'm grieving or having experiences. That is what we are here to experience and to have. And if I take that away, well, what is left? It's left someone that is not accepting their experience, so that in the end you have, well, you are stuck into something. You're circling yourself into that. So it was an interesting discussion around emotions. But back to our death theme tonight. I wanted to ask you, and you have already touched this, how do you have experiences talking with your beloved one that are dead, where you talk with them or experience them in messages, or for yourself or for other people? And I'm focusing on beloved one because that's what touches us personally the most, right? I can maybe, I can go with that. Start just briefly. The other day I experienced our dog Draft. He died I think something like 10 years ago, and we still have he's still here. We kept everything. So, but the other day I already dreamt of him many times, and but the other day I not only experienced his presence, I experienced him as a being, not the dog, let's say the global self, the being that he is, and that was amazing, simply amazing. So, anyone, Isabelle, do you want?
Yeah, so a lot of signs from the departed. Kimberley, like songs, that is so common. That is they really like to communicate with songs, or like my grandmother. I feel my grandmother all the time. And for whatever reason, my grandmother loved orange cars, and she loved the color orange. And so I see orange cars all the time now. And I know that's from my grandmother. And there are feathers, white feathers, cardinals, symbolism. So when your loved one communicates with you, just know it is unique to you, because each symbolism and message is unique to you. But what I would say, Scooby-Doo detectives out there, don't discount it, because when you acknowledge your loved ones communicating from the other side, they send you more messages. They talk to you. They'll visit you in your dreams. They'll guide you. And you can tune into their frequency, and you can communicate with them. You are energy. You are source energy. You just have forgotten it, people. So feel those emotions. It's all okay. It's all okay that you're feeling lost. It's all okay that you're scared and you don't, and it's uncertain and you don't know how you're going to live without this person or their friendship or in their life, or you feel more alone and all of that. That's for us. Do you know why? Do you know why we're experiencing loss? To feel connected to all that is, and to remember how powerful we are. That is your Scooby-Doo answer, but you have to do the work to feel it. It doesn't matter what Isabelle Zimmerman believes. It doesn't matter if I give you the answer, because if you can't do your homework, you just won't know it and you just won't feel it. So it's all okay. Once again, there is no wrong in the universe, including death.
Love that, Isabelle. And, I was just thinking about my own relationship to all of those that have transitioned. And I'm not very interested in communicating with any of them. I'm very deeply anchored in the present now. And it's interesting because I was thinking, that's really interesting, because I know, like, my grandmother, I recently put up pictures of my mother, my grandmother, whom I've lost, who both of them have transitioned. And I've had many readings where people say, your grandmother is always there. Like, there's this older, this woman, and she's your grandmother and stuff like that. And I look at that picture and I feel good when I look at her. Whereas before, I just wanted to be in the present moment and not dwell in any way on those that had transitioned. And I was just thinking, what's wrong with me? Why am I not sentimental, right? Like, what is that? Like, what is it? Out of sight, out of mind, right? And I was thinking, but wait a minute, I'm really interested in, like, my higher self, the energies that I channel. Those are super interesting to me, but I'm not very interested in my soul family that has transitioned. So then I went through a whole judgy thing. And then it was like, this is where I'm at. I love that because, you know, there are people that are like helping the dead. I don't know, I don't know. There are people that say that the dead, the souls don't know that they're dead, and then they need help getting to the other side or something like that. And I've never been interested in any of that. And probably it's fear-based, but it's also not my exploration. I think I'm just not interested in that. And that's what I love about being authentic. You can just say how you feel about things, you know. I'm not very interested in knowing about those that have passed on. I mean, sure, when I think of them, I love them, but I for me, my joy is in the now. My joy is in who is here now. And I guess the big challenge for me as I navigate the ascension is being able to appreciate them when they're here and being able to be okay when they're not, and having more fluidity in that arena where I can be attached and yet detached to accept exactly what is. So for me, that's just my interest. I mean, it's always really cool when someone's like, oh, your grandma's in the room right now, you know, but I've never been, that's not been my exploration or my interest, but I think it's really cool that it is for some.
But don't you think that could be also a trying to have a validation of what's in the other side, or to say, oh, I'm that takes
people
away
who
my
want to
fear,
know,
right?
people want to know,
Yeah.
they want to know. It's searching for more information about that unknown that we're, you know, yeah, that's absolutely an aspect of that.
And with that validation, Nikki, it's an interesting point you put out. And that's, you know, it's a little bit of a side story, but that's how I also became a channel and I trusted my abilities. So I'll tell you a little interesting story. So my dad has a bed and breakfast, and it's circa like 1830, right? And like nuns used to stay there. Anyway, it's this really kind of old place. And I've stayed there, you know, Christmases and things like that, not that often. And anyway, so I helped out my dad one week. He wanted to travel, so I decided that I offered to you know, to stay there and kind of run the place for like a week while they went, my dad and my stepmom. And anyway, so the night before, it was interesting. I stayed in this room I never stayed in before, and it had been, and even though I stayed there previously, I during that time I became more sensitive to energies, right? So it was the first time staying there before, you know, I got this high level of sensitivity, right? So I stayed there in a hotel in the bed and breakfast. And the night before they left, I was lying there and I was like, okay, there's like these energies happening in my room, right? And it was like they couldn't let me sleep. And it's, you know, because I'm a channel and I channel, like, you know, the angels and ascended masters, NETs, but other like people that have transitioned, their energy is very different, you know, and all the mediums out there, you would know this. And actually our sister Jenny, she's actually her background is mediumship, so she works with a lot of people that have transitioned. And the energy is very, very different, and it can be unnerving, and it's kind of an energy that kind of, I don't know, it's kind of can be like unsettling to me. That's how I feel. It's a very cold energy. And anyway, so I was lying there, I couldn't sleep, even my eyes shut, lights are buzzing everywhere. And there was a third party saying, I think it was like a shaman, wants to talk to you, this person wants to talk to you. I'm like, okay, but I need to sleep. All right, but I want to sleep. We'll talk later, you know. I was trying to feel like, okay. So I'm trying to sleep, couldn't sleep. It was like really trying to get my attention. Interesting. And anyway, so the next day I was talking to my dad. I'm like, do you know if there's like some spirit here? Because I've had some interesting experience. And my stepmom was like, oh yeah, so when you sleep and you hear a knock on the door, just ignore it. I'm like, oh thanks, you know, that's great. Anyway, so they leave. And then I'm looking after the place, and then again, this spirit was following me as I was, you know, helping clean and checking in people and stuff. And there's this spirit, I could feel it, like goosebumps on my skin, and it was, again, this shaman wants to talk to you. So I would open up a dialogue and blah, 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 blah. So anyway, end of the story, end of the time there, I would engage with it, got used to the presence of the energy. There was a moment where I was like I was making beds. And I put some music on and I started dancing, like, come on, Charmaine, let's have a dance. And I was dancing around, like having a joke, because she was always with me. I could see like this kind of purple energy as well. So anyway, always there. Anyway, so about a week, I was telling my dad about the experience. A week later, when they, you know, after they got back, I'm like, my dad goes, what was the name of that spirit, the name that you were saying? And I said the name. Oh, that's interesting, because I had a guest here and he actually does this for a living. He moves on spirits, you know, to the other side, I guess, when they're kind of stuck. And he noticed like his pillow was moving and things like that. And he communicated and he was like, you know, what's your name? And it was the same name that was told to me. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it was that moment. I know it's a little side story, but it's just that kind of validation, how you both were saying, it's that connection that allowed me to trust my abilities, that I can actually communicate. I mean, I've always been in contact with spirit. Like I've been able to see angels since I was an adolescent. And so it's been other jobs where it was kind of what we call as haunted. And I've been able, and I've had spirits like call my name and things like that. Like if I'm in a place where there's spirit activity, I'm sensitive to that, but I'm not like a medium as such where all these spirits just come to me like, we want your help. I'm not one of these people, but I'm sensitive in an area that the energy is there. Anyway, there's a lot of theories about all this stuff, like they're just portals and so forth. Anyway. But it was interesting because in that moment, it kind of made me validate that, yeah, it's true. You know, we can actually, you know, and for myself, communicate in detail with people, with beings, right? So that's just an example of the connection there, and that we all have this ability. Is that sometimes we, because of our belief systems, we kind of block it out. So yeah, if you had a loved one that's passed, they will come to you and communicate with you in ways that match your belief system. And like when for instance, my grandmother, again, my parents are still here, and but when my grandmother passed, and she was the last of my grandparents, I had this most beautiful image, and it filled me with so much love. I saw this brilliant golden light, and because my grandmother had dementia, and so did my grandfather, so they both passed of this, and then I see them both holding hands, walking. It's kind of like a tunnel, like we all say, oh, it's like a tunnel, this brilliant golden light, and they're smiling and they're holding hands, and I see the back of them, and they're walking towards the light. And my heart was just, my heart was just overflowing with so much love that yes, they're finally together, because there was a period of time when, you know, one went before the other type thing, and it was just, it filled my heart with so much love and compassion. So, and anyway, that came to me because it matches my belief systems and my abilities, because I'm a vision person. I do see visions. I have that kind of clairvoyant ability. So that's how they come to me. But for you, it could be seeing a butterfly or a bird or a song or another message. So it's just take note of your message, your belief systems around how spirit contacts you, because that's how they'll contact you. But interesting as well, I do remember Jenny, she was talking about, I think she was saying that like spirit, for a lot of people, it comes in birds. And I think also Wendy, because she's an animal communicator, I think she also mentioned this as well, that if you see a particular bird around you, then usually that's a kind of a path of least resistance for spirit to contact you too. It's birds apparently. But like I said, I'm not a medium. I don't work usually with people who have transition, but that's something that apparently happens as well. But yeah, so just keep an eye, like have awareness of your belief systems, but also make your intention to connect. And it's actually, we connect with spirit through the energies of our heart. It's the heart portal. So, you know, you might be on visualizing, but I want you to, if you want to connect with someone, a loved one that's passed, you actually feel the energy of them. It could be gratitude, love, compassion, whatever it is, and hold that energy in your heart. Then make your intentions to connect. You know, you can ask for a sign, you know, and just open your senses and just practice this. And we all have this ability to connect with spirit, because there's no separation in all dimensions, whether it's people of transition, whether it's dimensions of, you know, higher expressions of us, like, you know, angels and so forth, and ETs, and we have all these ability to channel all beings, right? Because they're all aspects of us. So because of that, we all have the ability. Of course, some of us are just more finely tuned to those abilities, but we all have the ability. So when you feel the loss, if you want to, and if you're ready, because not everybody wants to connect with their loved ones, right? Because it might be a bit too confronting, or they just have no interest. But if you want to, you can. So just know that. And but just understand what Isabelle was saying about the whole loss is that one thing I want to say is polarity system. We're here to expand through a polarity system, through fear and love, and loss is part of fear. And that's the beauty of physical reality. That's the power in it. It's the contrast. We cannot appreciate the bliss and the joy of just how beautiful our reality is without the fear, without the loss. It's the contrast. We need the contrast. But yes, we don't have to suffer through it, but with loss, especially with death, right? With loved ones, yes, we often do have a suffering, and this can be very intense, but it's part of the beauty of the system of reality. So from a higher perspective, this contrast, the movement between fear and love, loss and joy, all those emotions, it creates, and what Spirit, when I channel, they say it creates a ripple effect, an energy. And the movement of that contrast creates a ripple effect. It not only expands our consciousness, but expands all that is, and allows Source to view itself from this perspective. And by observing reality through these perspectives, it expands itself. We expand the universe. We are the universe. So there is, if we can stay in the present, because that's the beauty of it, yes, being in the present, and then just, cultivating our heart technologies like compassion and joy, gratitude. And it's the contrast, guys. That's the beauty in it. So even though it might suck and it might, and it's not fun to experience loss and suffering, because especially in the acute stage, you may go through suffering. That's okay. But if you allow yourself to process it, you'll move through that intensity of it more effortlessly. And when I say effortlessly, you're still going to feel it, but it's just a bit more smoother, I would say. And it just allows you to appreciate life a lot more. So that's the beauty of it. And that's a reason to why we experience loss, is to expand our consciousness and to be able to appreciate the beauty. It's a polarity system. It's how the universe expands itself. So if you're in it, it sucks. And know that you're not alone, right? Because we all go through it. No one is exempt from it. And yes, I know it might be tempting to do the spiritual bypassing, but you need to process it. No matter what just take a moment to reflect on it. Give yourself time to reflect on it. Yes, for some people, they might not go through sufferings. For some people, the way they grieve, they might not have an overwhelming sadness. That's just how people grieve. That's okay. If you're one of these people who don't go into the suffering and the deep loss and the sadness and the tears and you grieve, that's okay, because everyone grieves differently. But you still need to go through the process of that. And it's just part of the magic and the beauty of why we're here in the bigger picture. Yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to touch now what we have been experiencing, right? COVID, a disease that, or a virus, an epidemic situation, right? Which is not the first time that we have this kind of situation, right? We had that in the 80s with the HIV that spread, and it was quite something similar, because at the beginning there was nothing, so everyone right, it was a death sentence. And COVID, we had the same perspective at the beginning. We thought that it was very, very likely that once you reach a certain stage, you will just die, right? So we have these experiences, collective experiences of collective death. Can we talk more if we want? That creates a collective grievance. Because we are so aware of it that we are all together experiencing that in a way or another way, right? And so it becomes, everyone react to that then in their own way, but then, right, we have to see how we go through this. And what I perceive of that is that these experiences that we have at such a global level are for heavy change, let's say. The HIV pandemic and situation has led us globally to a change that has changed completely the perspective to what now we call LGBT plus, right? All the things that it. I have the impression that we add a letter every year, right? But that's the thing. It's that we are now expanding our awareness and our acceptance of all of these differences. And it's not that we need that suffering. We can get there without the suffering, but we use it. It's more that we use that. That change is there available to us, and then we use what is there to bring that change. Because if we get into an idea that we have to suffer to get to some change, and right, making that link of cause effect, is that then, right, we go into something that I personally don't want to go into, because then I have to suffer in order to be something. No, you don't. However, we use that. So COVID is the same. COVID is bringing change. What change? Well, we'll see, right? Change is available, right?
So I'm so glad that you brought this up. So the Black Plague really changed society because it wasn't farmers, kings, queens, the middleman or whatever, every children, mothers, fathers, they died, and serfdom was prominent. And that's when we started to pay wages for people to pick the fruit from the trees. And the middle class came about. And that was through the Black Plague. It was a great changer. So war, natural disasters, this is a catalyst for great change for humanity because there's such expansion through it. And destruction, creation, right? It is the design of source.
Yes, we use that to have that, right?
We really do. And, the pandemic, a lot of people are working from home. A lot of people are now at hybrids, partially working from home, partially going to the office. Some people are not going back to the office at all. So yeah, we're in a paradigm change right now. And, it's exciting. So, and it purges so much fear. Like, oh my gosh, there is so much fear around this pandemic. It's like crazy cool.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just jumping on what you said, Isabelle. And yeah, I channel this information all the time, that what we're going through, and it's not just the pandemic, because if you think about, it's such a big worldwide catalyzing event. But if you look before that, there was other events. It's a string of events, not by accident, guys, not by accident, because I was witness to it, because I'm in Australia. So the first big event in that chain of events was the Australian bushfires. It's not that long ago. it was like a year ago. Oh, no, it was a couple of years ago. But the whole world, I remember this. I was very curious. I'm like, wow, the whole world thinks Australia is actually burning. Like, I was like, wow, it's pretty full on. I mean, yes, there was a lot of bushfires, but it was like, I know the whole world was like, Australia's on fire, blah, blah, blah. So that was the start of it. And I witnessed, that was the start of the Great Purge, right? And people were going to a lot of fear around it. But I was observing that's very, very interesting. And then there was, don't know what came next. I think it was the US elections, maybe. There was a lot of fear around that. And then I think that's when the COVID started. And then there was, the whole Black Lives Matter. So that's an empowering movement that happened because of all these changes. There was a string, right? A string of different worldwide events. And the information that I came through was that it's all part of a collective purge, right? So what that is that for us as a collective to move into higher states of consciousness, for us to remember more of our oneness self, we need like the contrast, right? So we're experiencing this now on a collective level. We're all in this together. There's not one nation around the world who's not touched by these events. It's supposed to happen that way because what it does, it catalyzes us. It does bring up our own fears, whether it's fear of the vax, whether it's fear of COVID itself, wherever your perspectives are. This, for all of us, it might be mild, it might be intense. Regardless where it is, it's going to bring up fear some way or another. And it's meant to happen. It's basically triggering our collective shadow selves, right? And our personal shadow self. So these are our limiting beliefs, what I like to call limiting programs that hold us back, attach us into victim mentality. That's being purged, and it's for our evolution. So we're being challenged on ways we haven't been challenged before. It's triggering us for a reason. So we need to address this. And by witnessing and processing it, we transmute those shadow selves. And we see our reality in new ways. So yes, working from home is one thing, but it's about we question our existential existence. What is important in our reality? The whole fear around death is one thing. What's really important? And you'll find a lot of people now have a work-life balance. They're more focused now on family instead of this grind and work hard. Now they've got a life balance. That's just one thing, but there's also a bigger picture to all of this because we are doing our processing. And yes, some people are still obviously grieving because yes, there has been a lot of people that have transitioned because of this. But also a lot of people are experiencing other loss, like loss of jobs, loss of income, loss of structures. There's a whole lot of losses in all, not just the pandemic, but the bushfires, everything it's about how you perceive your reality. It's shifted, it's cracked. It's like a collective dark night of the soul, right? It's cracked wide open and we all get to experience it in our own unique ways, depending on what we haven't worked on, what we haven't addressed. But the good news is because we've done so much of this processing, because we have looked at our own fears, we as a collective are at a point where we're actually raising our collective frequency because of all this. You're probably experiencing in your reality, perhaps you were so fearful of something before, but now if you reflect on that same thing, you might go, hang on, I'm not really fearful of that anymore. So you can even, take notice of things in your own life. There's all these chain of events and how you've changed, how you've shifted because of it. So everyone has shifted. Maybe you don't perceive it to be a large shift, but you would realize that perhaps your perceptions have changed because of all this. And another awesome thing is that because of this, the collective is at a frequency that are now vibrating more in it's part of the whole great awakening of consciousness. We as a collective are now at a particular frequency where as we continue with this process, basically a portal will open up. And yeah, that's when we're going to have open ET contact. So all of this is actually preparing us for that. So I know this is taking us out of the whole, it's part of our journey for Oneness Remembrance. So it's it kind of seems like a side story, but it's not, because it's just shows you how everything is connected to a higher picture. So we go through this contrast for us to do our own purging, to address what is unseen within us, to change our perspective, to see the higher perspective, to do our processing. And by us all doing that, we raise our frequency, and that means that we're ready for the next stage of human evolution. So it's part of a collective evolution, not just a personal evolution. So when we're at that point, because we've dealt with so much fears, we're going to be able to deal collectively with the next triggering event. Because yes, when open contact happens, yeah, it's going to trigger a lot of people. But because the collective have already processed their existential fears and asked those existential questions already, when that happens, the majority will be able to handle it. So that's why we're doing. So that's another side note of why this is all happening. But of course, that may not ease you in the reality of the now, right? Because yeah, many of us have, might have known people who have transitioned because of the pandemic or the bushfires, or have suffered through all these events. So that kind of is like, you might not feel as connected to that event that will happen when it is a divine time. But I just wanted to share that with you, just to know that there are things happening behind the scenes that we may not fully understand, but it's a collective shift. And I know this might sound a bit, and I say this with compassion, is that the people who have transitioned through all these events, with all death, with all transition, it was their time to go. So they chose it from a non-physical level, and we can still have compassion, send our love and send our thoughts to those people who have chosen to exit this physical reality, because they do so with the intention, knowing that they're playing a part in this great collective expansion. So basically, you might want to call it a sacrifice, if depending on your perceptions, but with them playing this role, right, they are allowing the whole collective consciousness to rise, to increase, all that for us that is here to remember more of our divinity, our oneness. So they are all playing a part in this. So we can practice gratitude for the role that they're playing. So all those people who have transitioned, all the families that are suffering, the families that have experienced loss, the loved ones experienced loss, not just from the pandemic, but all these events that's happened all around the world, right? It's affected all the collective. We can hold gratitude in our hearts and compassion in our hearts that, they are playing this role for the whole collective, for us, because, we are connected. So yeah, at a collective level, we can practice compassion, love in action, and on an individual, in a perceived individual reality. So it might seem difficult, and yeah, it's like we're not immune to all this. We are having a human perspective. So yes, even though you might know higher perspectives, even though you yourself are aware of these higher perspectives, you can't bypass the human perception. So that's an important thing. You still have to process what needs to be processed. And it's a shadow work. It's a collective shadow work, right? And it's a process. And loss is part of that. And it's part of why we're here. So if we can, I don't know, it's about acceptance of it. We might not like it. We might hate it. We might not agree with people's behaviors, others' behaviors, or the conditions in which it presents itself. But if we can practice loving acceptance of what is, we let go of the resistance, let go of the attachment, and start to see the conditions that present itself from a higher perspective, from the perspective of source, of love, of oneness. So if we can practice acceptance with what is and do the processing, that is where the magic is sourced. That is where we remember more of who we are, and that's why we're here. That's my 2 cents.
Yes,
Thanks,
Nikki,
Kimberly.
you wanted.
I can't even remember what I was going to say. I love to highlight some of the things that Kimberly says. And one of those that was so brilliant to me was like the COVID and the fires and all of these things are the collective dark night of the soul. I love that. And one of the things about the perpetuation of the COVID is like, we wanted it to be, or I can speak for myself, but like around me, I was hearing the same thing. We wanted it to hurry up and be over so that we could feel safe again and we could be like where we were. And what I'm finding, because it's been perpetuated, is nobody wants to go back to where they were. That's a shift that's already done. And that's super interesting. So that's when we really can see divine timing at work, right? It's like I remember somebody said something maybe a year ago or a year and a half ago, like, oh yeah, this mask wearing, it's a way of life now. And I remember thinking, that's so sad. Why did I choose to come onto the earth at this time to have this experience? And my son, who's 21, also, like, he's very nostalgic about some other different epochs of his, he's like, Mom, you're so lucky to grow up in the 70s, and it was so cool getting to wear bell bottoms and all that kind of stuff. There's always a nostalgia that it's better somewhere else, or it was better, or it will be better. But in fact, the fact that COVID has stuck around is that we absolutely could not tolerate the level of fear, and especially those that were, that aren't awake. Okay. And it's interesting. I had a dinner party last night, and the discussion started, was around, at some point it was around vaccines, and my son doesn't want to get a vaccine. And the woman next to me said, but that's, if everybody got vaccinated, we wouldn't have COVID, and it's that faulty thinking, right? If I get this, then I'll be okay. If we get that, then we'll be okay. And the truth is, we are okay. That's the big jump, right? We actually are okay. And, when I think about this version of me, when I remember the 80s, and I remember like so many people dying, and I remember my own fear about getting AIDS. I was terrified. Even the word AIDS, somebody say it in a conversation, and I could feel the heat flush my body, because that fear was so visceral. And when I think about now, and like even when COVID first happened, sure, at first I was like, oh, like, is this a bubonic plague? Are we all going to die? And of course I had an initial fear, but very quickly, I moved into a state of acceptance, and the fear just dispersed, basically. And it's funny, Max, because at the beginning of this podcast, you said, oh, sure, you think, you're not afraid of death. And I remember about maybe 6 months ago saying to somebody, I'm totally cool. Like, if it's time to go, I'm good now. Like, I've had this amazing life and I'm good. I've had it. I've experienced it, and I'm okay. I'm okay with like transitioning, right? The other day I was in my car, and I had a little thing that scared the shit out of me. It was just like an almost, and I was like, ooh, maybe I'm not afraid of the concept of death, but I am definitely physically afraid of the event, okay? But I don't live in the fear of that. That's the difference. I just acknowledge my human experience. And the most powerful thing that you can possibly do is to just be in the present moment. And from there, there's so much that can happen. And keep that state of curiosity and be in appreciation for what you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that's amazing. That thing, right? I'm not afraid, but I am afraid. Right, and also, right, the coming also the trying to bypass it, and then say, well, no, but well, no, I'm no. There's something there, but also, very amazing what Kimberly said, and even there, right, the spiritual community trying to bypass COVID in saying, I will not get it because I know how it works. I know that as a creative being, or if I just, or right, everyone gets the vaccine and it's gone. Well, no, it doesn't work like that, right? We try not to face things. We try not to, right, to bypass and say, it's gonna be right. I can just be right. Okay, I said, but the thing is that what has happened is that with the awareness, energy follows awareness. Well, that's how it really went everywhere, right? So how do you stop it? right? With our thing of saying, oh, we can just, so it's really, the experience is going to happen no matter what. We do not stop it because we are awakened or ascending or whatever. The experience is there to be had, to happen. And we choose to have the change, we choose to have it. And I think that is something that is amazing. And I think that what we can take with us, well, we will keep the fear, obviously, or right, the human experience, we will keep it, we will have it, it's not gonna go away. But what we can also take with us is the awareness of death being change, transition. But what we can also take with us is the fact that death is not the end, which is what we fear, right? I die and the end. Well, no, it's not the end. And one thing that I realized the other day is that the fact that we are able to have communication with the death, those that have left, well, that means that they didn't die, because you can only communicate with the living, right? They are in another state, but we still communicate with them because we need to co-create the moment in order to have the communication. So that, for me, it's a very interesting perspective. So now it's I think that we have to come to a close. I think we could keep going because we still have a lot to discuss on this topic, but it's also, we don't want to go too long. So I don't know if any of you want to say a conclusion or add anything, please do. Otherwise, we're going to just say goodbye. So we say goodbye. Thank you so much for coming and joining us, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Oh yeah, who's hosting?
Kimberly.
Yeah, I'm happy to host unless someone else starts.
And Kimberly will be.
Lovely.
All right, we will
Max.
see you in 2 weeks. Thank you to all of you. That was amazing, and see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you so
now,
much. Bye.
Let me see, where do I stop this? All right, here. Bye-bye.